Hello and welcome to London Film Club with me, Raya El Salahi. It's time for your weekly dose of big screen talk right here on London Live. And joining me to take you through this week's cinema releases, the founder of a blog dedicated to new films, David Brake from One Room with a View, plus the self-confessed movie madman, Jans Antoniago, the editor of website The Movie Jerk. Here's what you've got to look forward to from tonight's show. Amy Adams plays a language expert thwarting threats of alien invasion, but is extraterrestrial sci-fi flick Arrival worthy of a probing? The haunting true story of a medical student's mission to help survivors of the Second World War. Find out what to expect from historical drama The Innocents. And Idris Elba and Gemma Arterton play not-so-happy families in a drama all about modern London, but is 100 streets as gripping as the city it's set in. So that's what you've got to look forward to from tonight's show, rather. And our first film up for discussion sees Amy Adams play a linguist recruited by the military to translate alien communications, all in a bid to save the Earth from invasion. Here's what you've got to look forward to.
There are days that define your story beyond your life, like the day they arrived.
Signs of what might be called first contact. The objects measure at least.
I'm Colonel G.T. Weber from Army Intelligence. Pack your bags. You're at the top of everyone's list when it comes to translations.
Priority 1. What do they want? Where are they from? You'll be reporting to me, but you'll be working with him when you're in the show.
That's what they call in the UFO.
That's the trailer. David, what have we got to look forward to from the film? What's the storyline?
Well, Arrival is sort of the latest big sci-fi epic. We seem to get one each year. That's not a bad thing, especially when they're of this quality. But you summed it up very well, so I'm just going to say what you said again, but in a male voice. The idea that basically these 12 different ships have landed on the Earth, and now we're trying to work out why are they here, hence the tagline. And then the idea is basically linguist Amy Adams, as well as theoretical scientist Jeremy Renner, try and communicate with the aliens to work out what the heck's going on.
Is there anything that Amy Adams isn't in right now?
No. And that's a great thing. This is a good thing. Why? There's a tone of sarcasm. This is a 5 times Academy Award nominated woman. She is fantastic in this film. Because we were praised her last week for Nocturnal Animals, and we can praise her all over again for this. It's just she brings just this wonderful gravitas, you know?
Yeah, I think Amy Adams is she's completely convincing in the role here. She balances that kind of intelligence and gravitas, and that sort of grace under pressure of a character. And the reason why this film really works is that she nails down that emotion all throughout the film, and she's just spot on as a character. You'd never imagine any actress playing that role.
And that's the great thing. That's why she is such a good actress. I mean, she supported quite well with Jeremy Renner. I mean,
yes,
we're
right.
not usually a fan of him, but he's actually quite good, and as is Forrest Whitaker, quite good as well. But it is largely the Amy Adams show.
And sci-fis, I feel as though, fall into kind of 2 categories broadly. It's either an action sci-fi or a drama sci-fi. Where does this fall?
Drama sci-fi.
It is, yeah. It's essentially, I would see it as a sort of an art house Independence Day, basically. Denis Villeneuve isn't concerned about that shoot 'em up Hollywood blockbusters. I've not at all. What I really appreciate about the film is that it's epic. There's an epic.
Well, it's epic in scope because the spaceships look great and the aliens look great, but there's that intimate element to it as well.
Yes, and there's that whole global crisis at the backdrop, but at the same time, Villeneuve completely narrows it down to something so intimate about the character of the main protagonist. And it basically focuses. What I like most about it is it focuses on how important communication and language in our as a human race, and it just nails it down completely.
Comparisons being drawn between this and Gravity, which many film critics loved, but many cinema goers felt differently about.
Yeah, I think it's got good quality. I mean, Gravity was good in certain aspects, and I think Arrival has that sort of element where obviously it's dealing with humanity and communication. This is not Independence Day, and so some people may find parts of it a bit silly or a bit too far-fetched because it deals with not what you'd expect. The trailer doesn't give away any of the key themes or any of the key structures in the way the film will go about its business. So there's you have to you go in and you actually get more than you expected, which is no bad thing. I think the main thing I also want to point out is Bradford Young is the director of photography. He's had this like starting to rise into the amazing career. Did Selma, Most Violent Year, and now he's done this, and it is a beautiful looking film.
It is a beautifully filmed.
Like, see, it's just there's just the way the spaceships are captured as well as the Earth itself. It's just A+.
And tell us a bit about the director behind this. The director behind Sicario and Prisoners.
That's right, yeah.
Is this in the same vein?
In my opinion, I think this is his most accomplished work to date. He manages to balance that sci-fi opera with something so intimate, and he basically, like, all what he's trying to achieve here is that there's philosophy in the sci-fi. It's very close to, if you remember, Robert Zemeckis' Contact. That kind of
that's
that
quite
kind
good.
of
Yeah, that's good.
sort of a very not so much feminist, but more very humanist sci-fi, in which it has this view of language and communication taking central, integral part of the whole film, and it's made even more beautiful in a way that the way when Dr. Louise Banks, the character, what she learns throughout the film, and she learns that, and she nails that down. She grounds it completely. The way, all what she learns from the alien's perspective.
So glowing praise for Arrival
definitely.
all
Great
round.
film.
Let's get to those all-important popcorns. However, the ratings for tonight, David, starting with you.
Give it a very high 4, like really like kissing the face of 5, but it's still a very high 4.
And Jazz, how many from you?
I think it's one of the most ingeniously crafted sci-fis in recent years, so I give it a flat out of 5.
Absolutely glowing praise, which means London
There
Film
it is.
Club gives Arrival
Done.
4 out of 5 popcorns. It's in cinemas across the capital now. It's rated certificate 12A. Don't forget, throughout the show, we want to hear from you. Has tonight's first review got you hot under the collar for a bit of alien action? You can get in touch and take part in the discussion on social media using the hashtag London Film Club. Right, next up on tonight's review hit list, a historical drama based on the haunting true story of a medical student on a mission to help Second World War survivors. Let's take a look at The Innocents.
Zdaję sobie siostra sprawę z tego, jakie to jest niebezpieczne. Elle se range à cette pas. Je peux vous faire envoyer une sage-femme de la Croix-Rouge polonaise. Non, il faut que ce soit vous. Ou personne.
Qu'est-ce qui se passe?
Quand je me suis engagée dans les équipes d'urgence de la Croix-Rouge, et puis je m'imaginais que j'allais sauver des vies.
Que cette lettre de Dieu pour nous aider à surmonter.
Vous n'aurez pas seulement besoin de l'aide de Dieu.
Jans, talk us through the plot for this one.
So this is set in the post-Second World War Poland, and this a French Red Cross doctor discovers a secluded convent in which houses a group of nuns. Many of them are pregnant and are victims of war abuse and rape from occupying soldiers, both German and Soviet soldiers. And so we have this group of nuns who are burdened by this terrible guilt and shame, and the fact that, you know, they're also burdened by the fact of the duty and faith. So they're completely in internal conflict. But they saw hope in one Madeleine Pauliak, who is, this is based on a true story, by the way. So they, despite their differences, they managed to find common humanity, and then this French doctor managed to help them survive through that ordeal. It's a very bleak subject matter, very depressing subject matter, and as you can see, it's set in the middle of winter. And it's just, there can't be any more. And it's a wartime Poland as well. But where Anne Fontaine, the director, managed to accomplish in this film is that she finds human sympathy and compassion in this drama.
It's a very elegant film, I'd say.
It is very elegant, yeah.
I mean, Anne Fontaine is renowned for doing these sort of very beautiful, very well-made films, and I think with this, obviously, like, as Jans was saying, that subject matter is very hard-going. That is a very, very severe story that very few filmmakers would really touch, because it's just so heavy, you know. When you listen to just that description, you're a little recoil. But it is done with a real level of nuance, and like you're saying, it's the sort of, it's a weird thing between Arrival and The Innocents in that weird way, where there's a sort of strain of humanity, which, you know, considering election results, is quite a nice thing to see in cinema. You know, the idea of the connection between these two people from different backgrounds, etc., trying to fight against an evil, I guess you'd say.
Yeah,
I've got to
true.
make a disclaimer about this one. I started to watch it on a week like this. I really struggled.
I would
because
give it a couple of days, have a curry, relax, watch good telly on Friday, Saturday, then Sunday. But it's certainly worthwhile because it's kind of like these films that you have to kind of push yourself to go see
I was
them.
going to say, how much is there a sense that cinema goers will have to get themselves into a mind frame, a certain mind frame, in order to watch this?
Yeah, I mean, there's always some ways like that.
As I said, it's a very tough subject matter, but I think it's elegantly crafted, in which, in a way, Anne Fontaine somehow uses its beautiful cinematography.
It's got this gorgeous centre, isn't it, with the winter, and it's Carole Champentier, the director of photography. It's like they're like oil paintings. I mean, you can see from the poster, it's got this real sort of wintry tundra feel for it. So you're allowed to have really stark colours and really good shots with it. And so I think it does have that.
And what's impressive was that the director manages to set aside somehow cinematography and own sense of style to actually just let the story tell itself, and it washes over you.
Given that it's based on a true story, a harrowing true story, how well does the director walk that line between telling that true story but also bringing something dramatic and entertaining to the screen?
Yeah, good point. I mean,
with any historical period dramas, there's always a sense of dramatization, basically. But I think this is a subject matter that's very delicate to tackle, and I think.
It sometimes trips over into melodrama.
That's right.
It can't help itself because this is such a severe topic that there's some scenes that are so gut-wrenchingly emotional that sometimes it's a bit like Light Between Oceans last week, where it just sort of trips over itself to not really walk the line well enough. But I would say it does. I would say it works, like 95% of the time it walks the line very carefully and well.
And it's tactfully directed.
Yes, it's very true.
It's really
Another one that's had a pretty impressive, glowing score by the sounds of it. But let's
it's all good. It's a 4.
4 from you, David and Jans?
It's a 4 for me too.
Wow, another impressive review for The Innocents, which means The Innocents gets 4 out of 5 popcorns in total. It's released in cinemas across the capital tomorrow. It's rated certificate 15. It's time for a quick break now, but don't go anywhere, as still to come. Idris Elba and Gemma Arterton play not-so-happy families in a drama all about modern London, but find out if 100 Street is as gripping as the city it's set in. Welcome back to London Film Club with Raya El Salahi. Bringing you the highlights of this week's cinema releases, along with movie reviewers David Brake and Jans Antoniago. Time now to find out what's making the top 5 in this week's box office hits.
You know me. I never sleep.
A new release this week, likely Oscar contender, Nocturnal Animals. Twit-woo. A tense thriller starring Amy Adams and Jake Gyllenhaal swoops into the top 5 with £755,000 at the UK box office.
What number life are you on? Apparently I'm on my 9th. But I keep my head up.
Stalking into 4th place this week is another new release. The heartwarming true story of a street cat named Bob, which came close to breaking 1 million in its debut weekend. No dodgy sums here, we hope. The Accountant has secured a decent spot in the top 5 in its opening week, taking £1.6 million at the box office.
May I?
Oh, snap.
Not much change at the top or on top. Trolls and Their Hair continue to do well, but took 1 million less than it did in its opening weekend last week.
I don't believe in fairy tales about chakras or energy or the power of belief.
You wonder what I see in your future? Possibility.
The Sorcerer Supreme still rules supreme. Doctor Strange conjuring up a further £3.4 million on top of last week's £9 million. Now that's magic.
Marvel's latest offering, Doctor Strange, making the top spot this week. Now, last but by no means least in tonight's rundown of what's on the big screen, a film that puts the lives of Londoners centre stage. Idris Elba and Gemma Arterton star in 100 Street. Here's a clip.
Life's pretty simple, you know.
See you later.
It's long periods of waiting broken up by brief moments of change. the moments of change, Mom, define you. And that'll be the only thing you're remembered for.
Just a little trailer there, but tell us a bit about the storyline, David.
So the story is basically 3 different lives interconnecting, well, sort of. I mean, that's the kind of how they sell it. It's basically trying to be a London version of Crash, where you have all these different lives and how they intersect, and from the top to the bottom of London. And it's an ambitious film. Like, that's quite impressive, and I think it gets points for being diverse, where you're showing the White Terraces of Chelsea to the estates of, you know, of inner London. Like, it's got a good range going on.
Well, I think with any portmanteau films, it's really tricky to pull all the strings together until an audience can finally comprehend that it all makes sense. And it kind of gets there, but
sort of.
I think it's too overwrought for me. And the problem really lies in its screenplay, where it tries to portray something really authentic, London life, but at the same time, it pushes the characters far too much into a believable sort of limit.
So really interesting you touch on that. Before we delve into this review any further, the script was written by a London property developer turned filmmaker called Leon Butler, who we've been speaking to this week at the film's premiere, and he revealed why the capital formed an important inspiration for the plot. And just a word of warning, there is some flash photography coming up.
Well, they're all kind of true stories, or a mixture of true stories. So, you know, I know, obviously I'm getting on a bit now, but I know a whole collection of characters, and it was just a question of finding how those characters interacted and how I could mould stories together. And the one thing I found was slightly based on our previous Prime Minister's big society idea, which never happened, but the idea of communities taking ownership of their areas. So I was keen to do something in one area, and that's kind of what happened. So my characters all went through their own issues, but they all kind of lived in the same area. You know, we've seen films like Notting Hill, and we've seen films like Kidulthood, both great films in their own right, but they're on the same street. Ladbroke Grove's so close to Notting Hill, but they were kind of all ostracised from their own communities. So I was keen to show that we have £10 million houses opposite council estates, and everyone lives pretty harmoniously. So hopefully, I mean, everyone goes through their issues in the film, but it kind of works. London works. It's not ghettoised. Public transport means that we all mix, and that's kind of great, because in places like LA, it's very much separated.
So the scriptwriter Leon Butler there, David,
Yeah.
it's the first film that he's done. Is it one to be celebrated?
Yes, to a point. Yes, to a point that you did it, and yes, that you should be this ambitious again in future. But, like James was saying, you have a lot of work still to do. You have to make sure that, yes, it's very good showing things that interconnect and interweave, but they have to mean something. They have to, one cannot, you know, Idris Elba's story has no effect on the Taxi Driver story at all. They never really combine.
No.
And the fact that we can forget Tom Cullen's storyline of the Taxi Driver for nearly 40 minutes of the story it just shows you that it's not fully interconnected. And having one scene at the end where they all sort of cross paths doesn't really count as interconnected.
You mentioned Idris Elba. We saw Idris Elba and Gemma Arterton on the red carpet there. Idris not only stars in but also produces this film, but in terms of the roles they play, how solid are their characters?
I mean, Idris is a very competent actor, same with Gemma Arterton. It's just the direction in which the characters go into. I think it's too heavy-handed and on the nose.
Yeah, they give it as best they can.
Yes, of course.
But it's like you're saying, like Idris's character in particular is a bit far-fetched.
Yeah, and his downward spiral seems to have just come out of nowhere, and there's no really, you're not fully invested in the character. And and there's so many emotional scenes that could have been far better if it was much more subdued. Whereas whenever it wants to hammer home an emotional core, it just uses a lot of music video montages with this dreary piano score, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I just found that it could have been a lot more impactful if it was less. Less
is more.
The screenwriter we heard there talking a bit about wanting to bring in elements of Notting Hill and Kidulthood. Is there a sense that if you like the latter, films like Kidulthood and Adulthood, this will be a film for you? If you like films like Notting Hill, perhaps not so much.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's appealing to the Notting Hill crowd at all, in the sense of Richard Curtis is not in any way linked to this film or like has any sort of thread for it. But I would say like the idea of Franz Drama and Ken Stott's storyline, which is a partnership of an older gentleman, a young gentleman who's suffering through crime, and a troubled youth. their storyline comes together. It's very sweet, it's very well played, it's very delicate, and that's largely through the actors, but it is given room to breathe. And so when it is given room to breathe, it's like, oh, I get it. You know, the whole connecting idea comes through a little bit. But the problem is that, like Jazz was saying, if you're telling me to feel something, whether through a piano or whether through a montage, it just feels like on. And so sometimes you're a bit like, oh, I get it. So you can't really connect.
OK, I think I know where we're going with this, but let's talk popcorns. Jan, starting with you, how many are you giving it?
I'll give it 2 stars. 2 popcorns.
2 popcorns out of 5. And David, from you?
I'll be more generous. I'll say it's ambitious, it means well, but it kind of fails. I'll give it a 3. 3.
OK,
nice 3.
Pretty harsh critics tonight. However,
what do you want?
I love this film. London Film Club gives 100 Street just 2 popcorns, a total of 2 out of 5. It's released in cinemas across the capital tomorrow, and it's rated Certificate 15. Right, afraid to say that's a wrap for tonight's show. Many thanks to reviewers David Brake from One Room with a View and to Jans Antoniago from the movie Jerk. And of course to you for watching. Do join us again, same time, same place for London Film Club next week. In the meantime, we're leaving you with some of the cinema releases you have to look forward to then. One of them at least with Eddie Redmayne's latest flick, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Enjoy your evening.
You've known for 24 hours that an unregistered wizard set magical beasts loose in New York.
Yes.
Where is this man?
So, you're the guy with the case full of monsters, huh?
Whose travels first?
Mr. Scamander, do you know anything about the wizarding community in America? We don't let things loose.
Hey, Mr. English guy, I think your egg is...